Welcome. This is Cheating Tale Stories. I thought my sister-in-law was trying to destroy my marriage with her pregnancy claim, until the DNA test revealed something far worse. My name is Marcus, and for 34 years, I believed I knew exactly who I was and where I came from. I had what most people would call a good life, a stable marriage to my wife Celeste, a decent job as an electrical engineer, and a close relationship with my in-laws. Celeste's younger sister, Vivienne, had always been part of our extended family circle. She was 28, worked as a freelance graphic designer, and had this way of lighting up any room she entered. Looking back now, I realized there were signs, small things that didn't quite add up. But when you trust the people closest to you, you tend to explain away the inconsistencies. You tell yourself you're reading too much into innocent moments. The bomb dropped on a Tuesday evening in March. Celeste and I were having dinner when Vivienne showed up at our door, tears streaming down her face. She was visibly pregnant, maybe 4 or 5 months along. I'd noticed she'd been gaining weight recently, but she'd always been curvy, so I hadn't thought much of it. "I need to tell you both something," she said, her voice shaking. "Marcus, I'm pregnant, and you're the father." The words hit me like a physical blow. Celeste dropped her fork, and the sound of it clattering against her plate seemed to echo in the sudden silence. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "That's impossible," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Vivienne, we've never." But she was already pulling out her phone, showing us what she claimed were text messages between us. Messages I'd supposedly sent, talking about meeting up, about how much I wanted her. The phone number matched mine, but I had never sent those messages. I'd never even had Vivienne's personal number saved in my phone. Celeste was staring at me with this look I'd never seen before, a mixture of horror and disgust that cut deeper than any knife. "How could you?" she whispered. "With my sister." "I didn't," I said, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. "Celeste, I swear to you, I have never been unfaithful to you. Not with Vivienne, not with anyone." But Vivienne was sobbing now, creating this dramatic scene that seemed designed to break down any rational discussion. She talked about how guilty she felt, how she'd tried to resist but couldn't help herself. She painted this picture of a months-long affair that I knew was completely fabricated. The next few days were a nightmare. Celeste moved into the guest bedroom and barely spoke to me. Her parents called, demanding explanations I couldn't give. Friends started avoiding me, and I could see the questions in their eyes whenever I encountered anyone from our social circle.
I knew I needed proof of my innocence, so I contacted a lawyer and arranged for a paternity test. Vivienne initially resisted, claiming it would be too stressful for the baby, but eventually agreed when I threatened legal action. "Fine," she said during one of our tense family meetings, "but when it comes back showing you're the father, I hope you're prepared to take responsibility." While we waited for the test results, I started doing my own investigation. Something about those text messages bothered me. The writing style didn't sound like me, and there were phrases I would never use. I took my phone to a tech specialist who confirmed what I suspected. Someone had been spoofing my number, sending messages that appeared to come from my phone but actually originated elsewhere. I also hired a private investigator to look into Vivienne's recent activities. What he found was disturbing. She'd been seen regularly with a man named Derek, someone she'd been dating for over a year but had kept secret from the family. Derek worked in IT and had the technical skills to spoof phone numbers and create fake message threads. But the real shock came when the DNA results arrived. I opened the envelope with Celeste sitting beside me, both of us holding our breath. The test confirmed what I knew. I was not the father of Vivienne's baby, but there was an additional section I hadn't expected, something the lab included as part of their standard comprehensive analysis. The baby's DNA showed markers that indicated the father was likely someone with a direct familial relationship to me, not a brother. I'm an only child. The genetic markers suggested the father was either my father or my son. Since I don't have any sons, that left only one possibility: my father. I stared at the results for a long time, feeling like I was reading about someone else's life. My dad, Richard, was 62 years old and had been married to my mother for 35 years. He was the kind of man who coached Little League baseball and never missed a Sunday church service. The idea of him having an affair with my wife's sister seemed impossible, but as I sat there processing this information, memories started flooding back. Times when my father had been overly friendly with Vivian at family gatherings, how he'd always made a point to sit next to her at dinner, how he'd offered to help her move apartments last year and had spent an entire weekend at her place, how he'd started going to the gym and buying new clothes recently, claiming he was having a midlife fitness awakening. When I showed Celeste the DNA results, her face went through a series of expressions: relief that I wasn't the father, followed by confusion, then horror as the implications sank in. "Your father and my sister," she whispered. "Marcus, this means—" "I know what it means," I said quietly. We confronted Vivian together that evening. When faced with the DNA evidence, her whole story crumbled. She broke down and admitted everything. The affair with my father had been going on for 8 months. She'd tried to pin the pregnancy on me, because she was terrified of the scandal that would erupt if the truth came out. "Your father said he would leave your mother for me," she sobbed. "But when I got pregnant, he started backing away. He said it was too complicated, that it would destroy too many lives. I panicked and thought if I could convince everyone you were the father, maybe we could work something out. Maybe you and Celeste would help raise the baby and no one would have to know the real truth." The conversation with my father was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I drove to my parents' house and asked to speak with him privately. When I showed him the DNA results, he aged 10 years in front of my eyes. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father cry. "I never meant for it to happen," he said. "It started innocently, just helping her with some computer problems, then having coffee afterward. She made me feel young again. Marcus, your mother and we'd grown apart. We were more like roommates than husband and wife, so you decided to sleep with my wife's sister." I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. "I made a terrible mistake," he admitted, "and when she got pregnant, I was terrified. I thought about leaving your mother, but I couldn't do it. 35 years of marriage, your mother's health problems. I couldn't just abandon everything." The ripple effects of this revelation tore through both families like a wildfire. My mother was devastated, not just by the infidelity but by the fact that she was about to become a grandmother to her daughter-in-law's sister's child. Celeste's parents were mortified that their daughter was involved in such a scandal. Even though she was completely innocent, Vivian moved out of state before the baby was born, cutting off contact with all of us. My parents separated, and my father moved into a small apartment across town. He pays child support for a child he's never met, sending money through lawyers to avoid any direct contact with Vivian. Celeste and I went through several months of marriage counseling. Even though I was innocent of the original accusation, the stress and mistrust that followed nearly destroyed our relationship. We had to rebuild everything from the ground up, relearning how to trust each other, how to communicate when family secrets explode your entire worldview. The hardest part was accepting that the family I thought I knew was built on assumptions that turned out to be wrong. My father wasn't the moral pillar I'd believed him to be. My mother wasn't in the happy marriage she'd pretended to maintain. And Vivian, who I'd treated like a little sister for years, was capable of creating an elaborate lie that nearly destroyed my marriage. To cover up her own choices, what bothers me most is how close her plan came to working. If I hadn't insisted on the DNA test, if I hadn't been determined to prove my innocence, I might have eventually accepted responsibility for a child that wasn't mine. The fake text messages were convincing enough that even I started questioning my own memories at times. Today, Celeste and I are still married, but we're different people than we were before all this happened. We're more careful about who we trust, more aware that even family members can harbor secrets that could destroy your life. We've talked about having children of our own, but there's always this shadow hanging over us. The knowledge that genetics can reveal truths that people spend years trying to hide. My father calls sometimes, wanting to rebuild our relationship, but I'm not ready for that conversation yet. Maybe someday, but not now. My mother is doing better. She's started dating someone new, a widower from her book club who treats her with the respect she deserved all along. As for Vivian's baby, my half-sibling, I've never met the child, and I'm not sure I ever will. Sometimes I wonder about that innocent little person who got caught up in all this adult drama, but I've decided that some family connections are too complicated to pursue. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones capable of the deepest betrayal. And sometimes, when you're fighting to prove your innocence, you discover truths that are more devastating than the original lie. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Sometimes sharing these experiences helps process the the complicated emotions that come with family secrets. If you have similar stories or thoughts about family betrayal, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below.